and welcome to the program. Eric, you spent a lot of time in the town I'm broadcasting from, St. Louis, as the headquarters of Enterprise. You find yourself in Connecticut, retired, and you've been called upon for your expertise and said, hey, you know what? I'm getting enough calls. Maybe I got something here people are interested in. And tell me a little bit more about your journey, how you've come to being an author of a book and doing the consulting that you're doing.
Yeah, so always fascinated with business. My father was a textile salesman. My mother was a teacher, and I used to overhear my dad when he would come home from a long road trip, and I'd hear all the ebbs and flows of business. So I was always fascinated by it. I was fascinated back in the 80s when the U.S. Olympic team gets a group of amateurs together to do something special and win a gold medal, and went to school for business, landed with an amazing company called Enterprise, now called Enterprise Mobility, and was able to grow within a company. I was one of four, learning all these lessons of what to do or what not to do, and was able to climb the corporate ladder to eventually lead a few hundred employees and become an executive of, fortunately, one of the most successful regions within the company. And I felt there was more to give. My dad one day asked me, he said, Eric, there's got to be more to life than being a textile salesman. And I felt there had to be more to life than just what I was doing. And I felt I had something to give. I felt I had a message of impact to deliver. I felt it was the difference between what our team was doing versus others. And it was culture. And it was this catalyst to execution. And so I created an outline and stories and interviews. And next thing you know, a book comes out from it.
Okay, great. Now, was this something that like Enterprise said, hey, Eric, here's your model, go deploy this model? Or was this something you discovered in your leadership journey? How did you develop this one of the more successful elements of the business and uncover, hey, culture is what's really driving this, maybe more than some other factors?
Yeah, lessons learned and then research and information. When someone tells you that engagement leads to great outcomes, you want to try to uncover what that might look like within the fabrics of an organization. And so I think, as I mentioned in the beginning, was really, lessons learned either in enterprise or many lessons outside from mentors outside of really reaching and always trying to figure out what could be next, what could we do for our team to do something special. And you kind of take a blend of everything. And the way I phrase it is Enterprise actually gave me the car when I was there, and it was my job to drive that car and utilize my team to help really align everything.
So one of the things in your book you just talk about is that the journey of culture is often misunderstood. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So when I was even doing a lot of the research, and I would go ask, first of all, what does culture mean to you and how can you measure it? It was usually, they thought it was the soft, philosophical hugs, high fives, rousing speeches. And I'm not saying those aren't important. Those are important. But
you would have loved our program a week ago or so. We had Craig Berube on, who was the coach of the St. Louis Blues when they won the Stanley Cup, and we had the little video clip of his pregame speech on Game 7 in 2019 when they won the Stanley Cup, and it was quite motivating. It's more than PG-13 for this program. But yeah, that goes so far, doesn't it?
Right. Well, they always say motivation gets you started, habit keeps it going. And what I loved about culture, it was truly the shock absorber during the difficult time. So not during great times, like Coach said, that big moment, those times where things aren't going well, and you have your team, your captains, in this case, his captains of the team, being what I would call culture carriers and bringing everybody together in order to achieve something quite unique. So, yeah.
All right. So when you talk about, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this at the leadership conference next week on Friday when I take the stage, about culture being intentional. Tell us a little bit of what you mean when you say culture should be intentional. That's an obvious. We'll go, well, of course it should, but it's not always intentional, is it?
No, listen, a lot of things, good things can happen unintentionally, unintended. I'll give you an example of intentional. So, within an organization that was struggling with customer service, and we're searching for answers, we're reaching out to what we would call our think tank, our leaders of the region, to come together and figure out what's going on. We flatlined. We're heading into a busy season, and all of a sudden we regroup and we find this video online, and I won't share too much of the story, but it was about Johnny the Bagger, and it's this young bagger who has Down syndrome and all the ways that he transforms this grocery store chain. And so we took that video and said, man, that's what we're missing. We're missing that attitude, that effort, and some of the behaviors that go behind it to put your personal signature on every interaction. And so we take that information and it becomes part of our new hire training class. So anyone who would ever come in views what Johnny the Bagger looks like. Then it's kind of put into every piece of the employee journey along the way as a reminder of what it's like to be a Johnny the Bagger and truly make a difference. But it doesn't stop there. It then goes into the employee reviews. And are you a Johnny the Bagger? And we don't stop there. We would put it into one of, we always say we want to.
Well, that's the question. Are you a Johnny the Bagger? That's the question.
Yeah. Are you?
That's a great question. Yeah.
Well, and then, but we then reward it. And so when I say intentional, now all of a sudden you have these weekly meetings to say, to your point, are you a Johnny the Bagger? And you vote on it. The ones who have the most votes have a chance to win an award. And all of a sudden, it's very intentional. It goes from this concept of a video, it's now throughout the employee journey, and it's a behavior that you can coach. Very intentional.
Yeah, that's a great story and one I can remember. So thank you. I'm gonna look into Johnny the Bagger a little bit myself. All right, so let's break this one into three areas here. How do you make culture practical, executable, and repeatable? I know you talk a little bit about that. Let's just start first with practical and then go to executable and repeatable.
Yeah, I mean, practical is coming up with what we would call the hourglass. It is a practical approach that organizations can use. So, I mean, I believe it's on the screen here now, where you'll actually, first of all, it's called hourglass, right? Because O-U-R is in the word. So it's hour, it's bringing everyone together, not an eyeglass like I've had since I was 7 years old. And so you'll see there are 5 stages along the way. The first is really, in my first chapter, is a listen, observe, and learn mentality, which is the discovery. We just had some attorney talk, and they do the discovery period. You're going to your clients, customers, stakeholders, employees, and you're pulling all of this information and asking important questions about whether it's initiatives or things that are upcoming with challenges and struggles. You then, as you pull all that stuff, it comes out of the hour, you're orchestrating the information. It becomes the plan, I guess you'd say, and there's the rollout. So all this stuff gets synthesized into the rollout. Those 3 to 5 key initiatives, some call them non-negotiables, commitments of what you're going to focus on. And then as you focus on it, it's really the reinforcement and training. The hourglass comes out. You now got to get everybody to truly understand what's going on within the organization. And that is again, training, reviews that it's put into place. And then it lands, the sand lands in the bottom. And now it's time to assess that approach. How are we doing? Whether it's a pulse survey, engagement survey, numbers sometimes tell a story. And you then, right when you think you have it, of course, Phil, you know what happens.
Yeah.
Technology and something unexpected.
Something changes, right?
You turn the hourglass over and figure out where you are in that process. But 2 other important things with the hourglass, you notice there were 2 boundaries, 2 pillars on each side. Mission, vision, values will be one of the guiding to all your decisions, and policies and procedures. And those are going to guide you through the decisions that you'd make within an organization. So it was a very simple, practical approach that people could visualize, understand from the new hire all the way to the person who's about to retire. So,
yeah, and very repeatable, right? I mean, it's the process in that. And one thing that we focus on a lot here, I mean, we will train 15,000 people annually across the U.S. And that training is often so misunderstood by employers. And what I mean by that is so often employers will say, oh, train my supervisors, I send them over, or train my leaders, or this person's got a challenge. Can you help them with some training and upskill them? And then you never see them again. It's never talked about. They don't send the next new guy back, and that's going to affect your hourglass. And that repeatable element of how we do training. How did you overcome that when you were a leader? Was that something that was a consistent part of the model you were deploying?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm looking at a poll, and the right materials, equipment, and information. That was everything. I mean, if cultures are behaviors, you can train behaviors, and so it was very mindful that anytime we come up with a new initiative, you cannot just throw something out and assume it's going to stick. You have to have touch points along the way. Everyone will understand it's slightly different, but from the new hire up, you've got to implement the Johnny the Bagger into all these different touch points. So training was everything. And there would be initiatives that would support the training. And so we would, under each of those 5 factors, Phil, there would be 3 initiatives within the organization that we would expect people to support it with. And so, again, going on very intentional.
Yeah, no, that's good. In fact, I want to stay on that poll question because I find this interesting. We always invite our guests to comment on the poll question. I think when I look at this poll results, I'd like to get your opinion. I think, strong relationship with the manager. I definitely agree with that. The majority of people say clear communication of expectation and goals. There's no wrong answer here. But I do find it interesting, the right materials, equipment, information, the skills that might be needed, what might fit within that in order to do those first 2 that got the majority of the votes. I'm just interested in your take on the overall results here.
Yeah, I am. Well, again, I think you're right. They're all very, very important. When I go reach out to people and say, what's prohibiting you from? It usually is, I don't feel I have the support. I don't feel I have the right information in order to be successful. And so I'm surprised that would be on the light side.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I find that because that involves to me the skills, the right information, the tools. Do I have the right tool sets in order to do some of these things? But Eric, how can someone get a copy of your book? And is there another way that people can follow you and learn more about what you have going on?
You can go a variety of channels. You can go on Amazon. It's at a Barnes & Noble near you. I was fortunate to have every state of Barnes & Noble carrying the book, so that's pretty exciting.
Congratulations, yeah.
But yeah, at a bookstore near you, people want to get a hold of me. Certainly LinkedIn is probably the easiest platform to reach me at, but I'm also on Instagram or an email at eric@clearpathventures.com.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear your success with Barnes & Noble. I wrote a book, I think it was back in 2000 and maybe 14 or so, called Leadership is Simply Complicated. And I've had one person read some of it. My wife read some of it. She read about half of it. It's still sitting there waiting for her to finish it. So that's a great success. Eric, I wish you all the best in your journey and impacting culture. To me, it's the number one thing we can do as leaders to help the challenges that we're having with retention, recruiting, and our ability to pay. I still think culture is a part of that. So I'm happy to see you're out fighting the fight, Eric.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link aimea.org/This Week at Work, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment, like LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're everywhere you are. And you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.